What's going on, everybody? Today I am going to be going over my hybrid Victor build. I am also going to be going over how to come back from a losing lane and how to play the game if you're coming out of lane being the poorest person in the lobby. Always an unfortunate situation, but it happens to the best of us. And I'm also going to be going over how to apply macro pressure on the entire map with your team, and how to kind of IGL in game and make calls to your team, because that is probably the single easiest way that you can win games in this game, is just making calls for your team, being active on the comms. Because I've played in a decent number of ranks. I've watched other people play in other ranks, and a common theme in pretty much this entire game is that nobody uses comms very well. And it's something that's pretty obvious to me after playing some more organized Deadlock in the Death Slam League, is that having good comms with your team is like a make or break in most situations. Unfortunately, I did not record this game live. This is a replay of the game, so I don't have my comms recorded, but this game and the couple games before it, I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna like tell my team what to do during the entire game, and I think I won every single game that I played doing that. So it's definitely a good thing to know how to do if you want to win your games. What I will say though is that it is very mentally draining to do that all the time. Like, you really have to try hard. And sometimes, sometimes you just want to come on to Deadlock and have a chill game. But unfortunately, this is not the most casual, friendly game. And if you don't have anyone on your team making the calls, and the enemy team does have somebody to organize them, you're probably not going to win the game. And that's just the reality of how it is. And I don't know about you guys, but at least for most of my games, I rarely have anybody using comms in a productive way. If anything, people will make a play, and maybe it doesn't go how they like, and then they come into comms and flame their teammates and be like, why weren't you there? You were supposed to follow me into that play. And it's like, well, dude, if you had used comms before you went in and killed yourself, then maybe I would have been there to help you, you know? But that's just how it is. So if you want that to happen in your games, you gotta be the one to make the difference. But anyway, in this game, I think my team ended up winning the other two lanes, and my lane we lost. And it was really just kind of an unfortunate lane to go up against. Mirage Silver is pretty hard to push into, and McGinnis likes to push. Victor doesn't really. It was just kind of a weird matchup. Definitely a winnable lane. By no means was it just like a hero diff. And I think we could have won, but we did make a couple mistakes, and it was really just a comms thing again, because there was a couple situations where I didn't really want to go in, but I saw McGinnis was going in, so I went in, and then McGinnis left, and I didn't know McGinnis was leaving. Not saying it was McGinnis' fault by any means, but it just happens sometimes. Just happens sometimes, but that just comes back to having good comms. And here's my first death, and I was kind of just going in to try and save McGinnis, and I'm like, oh, we could probably kill this Mirage. Right? I didn't comm anything to her, so she just tried to get out because she was already low, and I ended up dying because of it. And then since I wasn't there to protect her, she also ended up dying, and that just kind of became a common theme in this lane. I don't think we died too many times. We didn't really feed them too much, but we did end up coming out of lane 1 or 2 K souls behind our lane partners. But I realized that we were probably going to lose the lane ahead of time, so I made a comm to my other lanes pretty early, and I was like, hey, if you guys win lane, come gank for us, because we're kind of struggling over here. And I think that's actually what ended up happening, so it kind of worked out. But another thing is, this lobby was, I think my team was Oracle average rank, and the enemy team was Phantom average rank, so we were at a little bit of a disadvantage going into this game. And then we did end up having one of our players disconnect halfway through and then come back like 5 minutes later. And at that point we had been winning pretty substantially, but then by the time they got back we were pretty much tied again. So it was a little bit of a sketchy situation. But you know, sometimes you just gotta roll with the punches and see what happens. But to talk a little bit about the hybrid build, I think that this is my favorite way to play the character, especially in the Rift meta, because the hybrid build is more of like a brawly kind of bruiser build that focuses not on cooldown items or active items, but rather just boosting your stats up as much as possible so that you can stay in a fight, because sometimes the Rift fights go on for a whole minute. And if you invest heavy into active items like Infuser, Scourge, and cooldown, sure, you're really strong for those 10 seconds you have those actives going, but after that, you just die. And if you don't kill the enemies by the time those actives are up, you're significantly weaker for the rest of the fight. So this build focuses more on items like, well, gun damage to start with. It doesn't really have a lot of gun damage to begin with, but it builds Frenzy, which is really the only gun item you need. And I think it's a super underrated item on Victor because, for one, it gives debuff resist, and that's huge, especially when you level Jumpstart first, which is what we're also doing in this build. When you stack the debuff resist, it basically means that you can shed pretty much all debuffs on you within a couple seconds. So you don't really need to worry about things like anti-heal, which is why we build items like Radiant Regen, because Radiant Regen, typically, you wouldn't want to build that on Victor because you're kind of just putting all your eggs in one basket, right? Victor already has a lot of healing in his kit, and so if the enemy buys anti-heal, that kind of nerfs your healing, but then it also nerfs Radiant Regen, so they're double dipping in the value of the anti-heal. But if you have debuff resist and you stack it up with Frenzy, which is 40% by the way, and max jumpstart is 50%, they do stack diminishingly or multiplicatively, but that's still like 70% debuff resist if you have both of them. Which means, like Mirage, for example, his marks, you shed those really fast, you shed Inhibitor really fast, and pretty much anything you could think of is gone within 1 or 2 seconds, apart from maybe escalating exposure, because that's like 14 seconds or something insane. But that still reduces it to like 5 seconds, which is pretty substantial. So because you have that debuff resist, it allows you to build the items that you normally wouldn't, like Radiant Regen. And you build that early because early, lifesteal isn't really doing a lot. Until you get escalating exposure and spirit power and all these items that Victor needs to actually do the spirit damage, if you build Infuser before all that, you're not really going to be healing a lot. Like, you still do decent damage, but it's not optimal, I guess is what I'm saying, before you build those damage items. Radiant Regen, on the other hand, doesn't need damage items to give you a lot of sustain for the early Rift fights. And since this build is stacking early spirit power with things like opening rounds, improved spirit, suppressor, all of these items give you free spirit power. And Radiant Regen scales with spirit power rather than scaling with just damage. And so, Radiant Regen gives you a solid amount of sustain in the early to mid game before you get your lifesteal online. Also, speaking of lifesteal, Frenzy just got a buff that gives it bullet lifesteal, which is not as good as spirit lifesteal on Victor, but you know, we take it. This is a hybrid build, we're doing bullet damage, so it's good. It's really solid. I thought Frenzy was a solid item on Victor before the balance patch, and now I think it's even better. So, yeah. Buy Frenzy and profit. But what was I talking about? I was talking about why I build Radiant Regen early. I also build double vest early now. I was a big hater on the double vest for a long time. I was always like, just buy Spirit Resilience instead, because it gives you more spirit resist, and most of the damage you take is spirit resist. Also, this moment right here in the game, I was very upset. I was very upset because I heard Ivy flying. I'm like, okay, she can't shoot me off the vent. I can get to the buff before her. Then she cancels her flight, comes in behind me, shoots me off the vent, and then takes the buff. I was like, okay, I just came out of lane. I'm the poorest person in the lobby. I could have used that buff to farm faster, to push more, to get caught back up, and then she just comes and steals it right from under my nose. I was like, all right. But, you know, I wasn't going to let myself get tilted at this point. It was like, my other lanes won their lanes. I might not be carrying the team right now, but I just need to play my own game and not get tilted. Let my teammates put in the work. Also, that's another important thing to mention. I know I said that this was going to be like, oh, how to come back from a losing lane. But the reason I was able to come back from a losing lane is because my other two lanes won their lanes. And if they had both lost their lanes as well as me losing my lane, it would have been a lot harder for me. So I don't want to discredit my teammates in this game because they were definitely pulling their own weight, and they did carry me through the early game. But that being said, back to the build. I think double vest is really good on this build because we are going hybrid, and double vest, I guess I shouldn't say double vest because one of them's a vest, the other one's Enchanter's Emblem. But they're both vests in my mind. So Enchanter's Emblem gives you spirit power, which, like I said, we're stacking because it buffs Radiant Regen, it buffs all of your abilities, it buffs Jumpstart, which we're maxing first, it buffs Pain Battery, which we're maxing second. And the reason that we're maxing those two first, rather than my previous build that maxed Aura first, is because I think Aura is still a really good ability to max, but specifically because we are investing in spirit power in this build, I think Jumpstart and Pain Battery just scale better with spirit. I also alt max last now, which may be controversial to some people, but they did buff back the ult timer because they nerfed in that global ult nerf patch. They nerfed both the upgraded cooldown and the normal ult timer. Sorry, I'm struggling for words today. I'm kind of tired. But after that, they gave Victor a specific buff along with Silver because they thought it was a little extreme to have his ult be that long. So now it's kind of back to where it was before the nerf, but they didn't buff the cooldown reduction that you get for upgrading it. And so I just don't really think it's worth it anymore. I think it's still worth it in a build like my support build, where a lot of your value is coming from your aura and from having your ult up in the team fights. But in this build, this isn't as much of a support team fight build as it is a carry slash just be there when you need to, I guess, type of build, because I'm kind of rambling at this point, but the ult cooldown timer is something that you can play around, I guess is what I'm getting at. When you level up your ult, you have, I would say you have like one ult you can use if you want to before the first urn to make sure that you have your ult up for that first urn. And that's something that I tend to try to do. I don't int to just waste my ult, but if I see a play I can make with my ult, I'll be a little bit more aggressive in lane because I want to get that upgrade for my gun that you get from leveling the ult with 1 point. You get spirit damage on bullet, and you get extra fire rate. And the spirit damage on bullet allows you to proc Mystic Regen, and it also allows you to proc Suppressor and Mystic Vulnerability on targets from far away, which can be really nice in lane for trading. Also, if you buy Healbane, which is an optional item in this build, it allows you to proc that on them in lane from far away, and then they don't get healed as much from the heal minions. All that to say, I think that putting 1 point at least into ult early is really good, but leveling it all the way is not. Because, like I was saying earlier, a long cooldown is something that you can play around with your team and just as an individual. I see a lot of people who play Victor say, oh, I need to level my ult because the more ults I have, the more I can push objectives. But this is not really the way that I think about Victor's ult, because yes, having your ult up allows you to make stupider plays and int under walkers and sometimes get them, but it's also true that not having your ult up while having 1 point invested into it allows you to do basically twice as much damage to the walkers. And that means that if you are smart about your macro plays with your team, then you don't need your ult up. Your ult actually isn't doing anything for you if you're pushing a walker just to create space on the map for your team. What I mean by that is that if your team is fighting on a rift and they draw the entire enemy team over there, you can push a walker without having your ult up and take it really fast because you do a lot of gun damage if nobody comes over to stop you. That usually doesn't happen, especially the higher up in rank you go. People will realize we can't leave Victor alone in the side lane, somebody has to go counter him. So if they send one person over to counter you, that's fine. You just don't play as aggressive and make sure they can't kill you. Like if they sent a Wraith over and she has ult up, I would be very, very careful about pushing up on her because she can just ult you under walker, you get stomped, she just guns you down. It's no good for Victor. If they send like an Ivy or somebody that's not like a hard side lane carry to counter you, it doesn't really matter. You can play it a little more aggressive on them because there's nothing they can really do to stop you. You don't need to be super aggressive because they've already sent somebody over to counter you, which means that your team elsewhere on the map isn't fighting a man down. Now, if they send 2 people to counter you, that usually means that they will probably kill you if you don't back off. But it also means that your team elsewhere on the map, for like say Rift for example, if you have 5 people on the Rift and you're on the weak side pushing a walker and they send 2 people over to counter you, that means that your team is fighting a man up on the Rift. And if that's the case, that means they should theoretically win that battle. And you are doing your job by creating space for them and distracting people. Now, if you have your ult up and they send 2 people, you will distract those people for longer. And you can die under walker, get good walker damage, maybe even take it, who knows. Probably not though if they're playing smart. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling again, but to summarize my ability point spending, I do jumpstart first, battery second, aura third, and ult last. And I think this is the best way to do it for this build in particular because we are buying lots of spirit power. Jumpstart and battery scale the best with spirit. And once we max aura, we've already gotten some lifesteal items like leech, for example. Frenzy's a lifesteal item now. And if we go spiritual overflow, that also got buffed recently to give more spirit lifesteal. And if we have all those items, I think having aura maxed is very important because it gives us more damage, which means more lifesteal. And I guess another thing to point out is since they've changed the boons to where you're maxed out at 49,000 again, it means that your final upgrade, your final tier 3 upgrade comes much later than it normally would. So you have to really think about which one you want to sacrifice for most of the game. Some games, most games actually, you don't even get that far to get that max upgrade. So you gotta think, do you really want to sacrifice that healing from your battery, which becomes pretty significant midway through the game before you get to 49,000. Do you want to sacrifice the debuff resist from jumpstart and the bonus healing? Definitely not. Do you want to sacrifice the damage from your aura? For a build like this, and for any Victor build, in my opinion, I would say no, because that's a very big buff for your entire team. And that kind of just leaves you with sacrificing the 90-second cooldown reduction on your ult. And yeah, it does give a longer stun, and it gives, what else does it give? Whatever else it gives, it's not that important. It's so unimportant that I can't even think of what the other buff it gives is right now. It's mainly for the 90-second cooldown reduction, though, that you're upgrading it. And in my opinion, that 90-second cooldown reduction is the easiest thing that you can play around and still be successful on the character. Because especially in a build like this, you need all of that raw power that you get from battery, jumpstart, and aura being maxed. As I've said this before in previous videos, but Victor is very much a numbers guy. And if the math equation does not balance in your favor, you just die, because you don't have a lot of tools to outplay people with. I'm not really going to go too much more in depth on that. If you want to know my thoughts behind that, you can go watch my other videos. So at this point in the game, we have completed my first box of my build. And you can see we have our 4.8k green spike, we have a lot of purples, we don't have a 4.8k gun spike, but we're saving up for frenzy right now, and once we get frenzy we get to 7.2k, which is another spike, and so we kind of just bypass the 4.8k gun spike. I do have a few items that you could go if you really want the 4.8k gun spike, but in my experience I find that I don't really need it, because early game, I'm not really looking to be a damage carry. I'm more looking to be a sponge for my team that just kind of soaks up cooldowns and lives for as long as I can on the Rift or in the team fights. And so obviously that changes as the game goes on. Once I get frenzy, once I get escalating exposure, I start to actually do some serious damage. But just for those early fights, I'm mainly focused at debuffing the enemy team and just kind of being a nuisance on the Rift and surviving as long as I can, because those fights last a really long time sometimes. Sometimes you just need to survive and hold out until your team can get back to you. I don't know if I finished talking about the vests, but I think I talked about Enchanter's Emblem is good because it gives you the bonus spirit, and Battle Vest is obviously good because it gives you gun damage, which, since you're not investing in the 4.8k gun spike, every bit of gun damage is a significant increase for you. I like opening rounds as a singular gun item because one, it gives you bullet velocity, which is really nice because Victor's gun is kind of erratic and it doesn't have a consistent pattern, so making those nails or bullets or whatever you want to call them a little faster makes it a little easier to deny souls in lane. It also has the passive on it, which just gives bonus damage when they're above 50% health, which is really nice for not only engaging with people, but also for farming the jungle. In previous builds, I would build monster rounds because I just thought that was... I still think that's a really good item, I just don't have room for it in this build. The downside to that item is that it doesn't really help you fight other players, it only helps you farm faster. And it helps you dive objectives better because it has that NPC damage resistance on it. Also, Tornado Mirage, the bane of my existence. He didn't really do much to me this game, I just find that character so annoying to deal with. I don't know. That's a side note though. The benefit to opening rounds is that it does damage to people too, which is really nice. And it gives you that extra spirit, which is really nice in the early game because everything that you do scales with spirit. I know I was kind of hating on spirit, boundless spirit in my previous video. I was kind of just memeing at that point, but for that build in particular, I don't think that it's very good. For this build though, I do, because that's kind of what the build is centered around, is stacking spirit so that you get those big early max jump starts and max pain batteries. Since that other build maxed ult and aura first, spirit was not very good in it. And that's another thing that is kind of important to learn, is like making sure that everything in your build synergizes with itself, which is something that I think this build that we're looking at right now does very well. Just for example, if you are somebody who likes to build active items like Infuser or Ethereal Shift or Scourge, I think those are all really good items on Victor. This build doesn't typically use them, because like I said before, it's not focused on active items or cooldown. We don't even buy cooldown at all. But in a build like that, you would be buying cooldown. You'd be buying Transcendent cooldown. And if you're buying Transcendent cooldown, you can buy items that benefit from that item. One of the best items that benefits from Transcendent cooldown is Torment Pulse. And I am like the #1 Torment Pulse hater on Victor. You will never hear me defending a build that uses Torment Pulse on Victor. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Torment Pulse is bad. But that being said, it's a lot better if you have Transcendent cooldown. And this was a really rambly example of what I mean by item synergy. But basically, make sure that the items that you're buying are not only benefiting you in one way, but also benefiting the other items that you buy. The Transcendent cooldown makes Torment Pulse proc more, and it also makes your cooldowns on your active items shorter. I guess in this build, an example would be you're buying a lot of spirit items, and you're stacking your spirit power as much as you can. Radiant Regen scales pretty decently with spirit. Also, later on in this build, you buy Merc Mag a lot of the times, and Merc Mag is another item that I think is pretty misunderstood by a lot of people. I see like Wallbreaker Victor who builds all gun items and then throws in Merc Mag at the end, like just doesn't understand the purpose of that item, because Merc Mag does not scale at all with gun items other than fire rate items. So this build takes advantage of being a hybrid build that doesn't really build gun damage items by using Merc Mag later on in the build to do that single target damage for you. Quick side note, at this point in the game, we are beating them, but not by a whole lot, and I just noticed that our Celeste has been AFK in base for the past couple minutes, and she still stays AFK. She does come back later on in the game, but I'm like, wait a minute guys, this isn't good. Because our Celeste is one of our, well, I guess we're all pretty evenly matched on the souls department on my team, but our Celeste was definitely having a really good game, and I think by the time she comes back, they've pretty much totally caught up to us in souls. We do get the mid boss here, which is good. But yeah, anyway, back to what I was saying about Merc Mag. It's really good in this build because we're not investing in a lot of gun, so we don't have a ton of gun damage, but we are investing heavily in spirit, and Merc Mag scales with spirit, it doesn't scale with gun. So just for future reference for you guys, if you're trying to make a build yourself, if you have a gun build like Wallbreaker Victor, you shouldn't be building Merc Mag on it. You really only build Merc Mag on hybrid characters, or even like a full spirit character that wants to do single target damage is really the ideal situation for Merc Mag, because that's what it scales with. Anyway, going back to the build, the vests, Battle Vest and Enchanter's Emblem, when you combine those with Suppressor and Mystic Vulnerability, which are also items that you buy pretty early in the build, you get around 29-30% resistances in both bullet and spirit resist, which is a pretty fairly evenly balanced amount. And it's a solid amount too. It's pretty much as the spirit and bullet resilience items before they get their passive procs, which only procs when you're under half HP. And it's true that Victor tends to be lower HP sometimes, and you won't get the full benefit of the vests when he is lower HP, but I find that he's actually utilizing them a surprising amount for farming and for engaging in battles, and I think in the early game it's pretty solid. Like, I think they're just pretty solid items, and I try to build them on any characters that can utilize them pretty well. If you are going against a very spirit heavy team comp or a very gun heavy team comp, you can consider skipping one of them and replacing it with an alternate green item. And you can even consider skipping like Suppressor. If you're going against a full spirit team, you don't really need Suppressor, but the majority of the time, I think that they're good items that'll just help you in most situations. Just to survive longer, be tanky, do more damage, do more healing. Just all the good stuff, man. And yeah, I think that's enough talking about those. What else is there to talk about in this build? At this point, I'm not even going to get to talk about the gameplay. I've been yammering too much about the build. I do wish that this was a game that I'd live recorded, because the comms in this game were just like immaculate. And my team was just on top of everything. We were calling out the buff timers and the mid-boss and what plays to make and who needs to be on what side of the map. It was just great. If you guys do want to see some live gameplay, I have not been streaming much. I'm probably going to start streaming more soon, so go check me out. I will link my Twitch in the description. It's the same as my YouTube with an extra E at the end because someone stole my name on Twitch. They didn't actually, but it wouldn't let me take this name for whatever reason. But yeah, if you're interested in that, I'll probably be posting some more live games at some point in the future. So yeah, stay tuned for that. But at this point, I think I'm just going to make this mainly about the build and less about the macro stuff. We'll probably do another video at another point covering that type of stuff. Because yeah, I've just been talking about the build too much. Man, it's just too juicy. It's just like, look at this. I'm not dying. Okay, I might be dying, but it's okay though, because I'm Victor. I got 2 lives. But yeah, the healing that you do in this build is just crazy, because you're maxing jumpstart and you have frenzy, so you can't really get anti-heal on you. Like, if you look to the side of my health bar, you'll see the only debuffs that stick on me are escalating exposure, and that's about it. Everything else just flows right off like water. But yeah, at this point, like, really, once you get frenzy and escalating exposure, you're like full build and you can do whatever you want. Everything after that is just the cherry on top. Boundless scales everything in your build really well, and once you get Merc Mag, you actually become a carry. Before Merc Mag, you still have to kind of play around your team, and afterwards you still should as well. But once you get Merc Mag, it just, like, your damage just skyrockets. It's insane. I don't know why more people don't build this item on Victor. I do know why more people don't build this item on Victor. It's because they think Victor's the AoE guy. They need items like Scourge, not Merc Mag. Merc Mag's garbage. Okay, look at the... Hold up. Before I go on a rant, look at this massive bag that we're all fighting over. I think it gets picked up like 3 or 4 times before. I don't even know who ends up getting it. It keeps getting dropped here. There, see, Silver drops it. I think maybe our McGinnis grabbed it. Yeah, she did. It's like one of the biggest soul bags I've ever seen. I don't know what that... I think it was... I don't even know who... I think it might have been 7 originally had it. I'm not sure. It was like, holy moly. But, yeah. Merc Mag. The reason people don't buy it is because they just think that Victor needs to be AoE and tanky and survive, but I'm telling you guys, when you have Merc Mag, it lets you 1v1 the carries and win. Like, you can kill Wraith, you can kill Hazed, you can kill 7. I mean, you could kill 7 before, because 7's just not very good at running away from Victor. But this Haze tries to come at me with her double Echo Shard Dagger build, and then I'm like, wait a minute, I'm Thanos right now, I don't care. So I just turn and she runs away, and then my team is here, so we're able to clean up the kill. But yeah, I think at this point I've kind of covered most of the stuff that you need to know for this build. I guess to summarize it concisely, it would be that rather than focusing on active items like Infuser, we are taking items that last long periods of time like Leech, because Infuser is really strong. I'll put a graph on the screen, maybe, if I remember, of kind of the power difference. Infuser is really strong when it's active, and then when it's not active, it's really weak. Leech is just a steady amount of goodness throughout the entire battle, and it seems to me that fights have kind of shifted to be longer rather than really focused and bursty in the current meta, which is why I think that a build like this is really good. When everybody was mainly, the big team fights were around mid-boss and contesting rejuve, I think it was a lot better to prioritize items like Infuser, because you pop Infuser, you go into the pit, and you can't die. But now that those fights have kind of been extended to include things like Rift, which lasts a long time, and it just seems like fights are more brawly in general, I think that relying on those cooldown items is not as optimal as it once was. I don't think it's bad by any means, and I think that a lot of the builds that still use those items are pretty solid. I just like this one better, so that's really all there is to say. I've kind of rambled on throughout this entire game, but hopefully you guys found it interesting. Hopefully I didn't bore you too much with my rambling, and unfortunately I was not able to commentate over the gameplay because my mind has just been wandering, and yeah, so I guess this is it. Like I said, thank you for watching. Appreciate all of you guys. I will be coming out with more videos soon. I'm gonna be making a highlight video next over a tournament that I won with my team a couple weeks ago, which was pretty fun. So stay tuned for that. And I'll probably be making some more math videos. I might be streaming on Twitch, Synergy EXE with 2 E's at the end. Come check it out if you want. Maybe I'll be there, maybe I won't. You know, you never really know with this guy. So, and then the Billy says insane matchmaking at the end, even though that entire team was like mid to high Phantom, and my entire team, I think I had an Emissary on my team, and the rest was Oracle. So, you know, it just is what it is, I guess. Woo, MVP, let's go, baby. And remember, we started this game being the poorest in the lobby, couple deaths in lane, not looking too good, and here we are coming out on top. And that's just the power of luck and good macro, and yelling at your teammates to go do stuff. So I encourage all of you guys, go yell at your teammates in a nice way. You don't want them to tilt, but the more that you tell people what to do when you know what to do, the more you'll have success. And with that being said, have a wonderful day/night. Peace.